So I'm not going to record this one because I'm pretty sure this is I assume it's a hacker trap. If this is designed to actually be beaten, based on my experience, it is very overtuned. The best strategy I can offer, if it is meant to be beaten, this is how I beat it. Have a extremely high DPS. I use Shout here. It's, still the best DPS in the game by far. Cook all of your best buffs until the third fight. That's already a challenge. The first fight is not too bad as long as you have a high DPS. The boss periodically just buffs itself more and more and more, so you have to kill it relatively quickly. You can break it, but you don't have enough room on your team to take a breaker because you need a lot of DPS and support for the rest of the fights. If you do take a breaker, you can just perma-break the first boss. It's free. It's not worth it. You're going to have a impossible third fight doing that. The second boss cannot be broken. The third boss cannot be broken. You can probably force break them with the murder arc, but then you're really gambling on random percent proc if it's not completely blocked, which they have been recently making it so that that doesn't even work anymore. And even when it does work, if they're not meant to be broken, they usually have a break time of 0 seconds, so they just immediately unbreak, so you don't even get anything for using it. Usually. So, the first boss, just a DPS check. I mean, it is a little bit of a durability check, but it's mostly just kill it before it buffs up to where it'll wipe your whole team. The second boss, you have a breather during the first phase. Move your healer and your support if your support is ranged. I use Telestrio, so he's moved down to the other corner. Both of them to the bottom corners. Or the closest to the screen. The bottom corners. You know what I mean. So, when they're standing there, they really won't get hit by much of the attacks, so they're pretty safe, and you can kind of just restock your NP, fill up your stocks, kill one of the bosses if you are having an issue. As soon as you kill the second boss, the main boss spawns, and both of them respawn, and it'll immediately use a AoE attack that is pretty much a one-shot unless you use Rena's buff or some other high-level mitigation. I thought I could go in there and kind of cheese it with Prim. Not the case. I forgot that her special is only physical attacks. And basically everything in this fight is magical, so sadly she's worthless. I was kind of putting some time into her throughout the week, thinking that I would use her on this fight. Irrelevant. Don't bother. I mean, she's a good defensive support all around, just not for this fight. The AoE comes off as soon as the boss spawns, so you don't have time to put any debuffs on it. You can move Telestio underneath the boss, and his ring will apply to it before the buff goes, or before the AoE goes off, and it'll lower its magic attack a little bit. I'm pretty sure it lowers their highest stat, and it seems like everything in this has magic attack as their highest stat, so I'm assuming it helps. It's hard to really tell because usually you're going to lose your squishies and only your healer's going to survive. Now, you have to get your team back up if they die. Ideally, they don't die. I didn't die on this clear, or I think Telestio died, but my main DPS did. Assuming that they survive, you want to immediately kill the right side head, and with Shaltir, you can stand on the left side head, throw your spear across into the right side head, and hit all three of them. And this is just another DPS check, honestly. Once you get that out of the way, you just spam the rest of her attacks, hit the left head and the center head. Ideally kill both of them, and then just burst down the boss. Hopefully you get enough goddess procs that you can just continuously skill and kill the center boss. Because if not, I don't know if there's a mechanic. It doesn't seem to be a mechanic. It just randomly redoes the AoE it does on spawn over and over and over. There's no rhyme or reason to its pattern. It just seems to pick what it wants to use, and if it spams that, you will probably die, and GG. You can't use your good defensive buffs on that fight, other than maybe Rena's special. You won't get it back, but if you have the goddess, or not the goddess, the God of War, or War Gods, whatever, the G-War arc, that thing. If you have that, you can get all their specials back on the final phase. Round 3, you're going to probably need to have that, honestly, and it's probably going to need to be, I guess it doesn't need to have its skill max. Depends on what unit you're using, but assuming that you're going with Shaltir, which is the only one I think can possibly do this fight, other than if you're just completely willed out, I guess maybe enough passive stats from units and you can beat the fight. But for a pretty good player, like in terms of gear, I had a hard time. If it's not clear. The final fight. This is just completely RNG. The other two are also heavily RNG. This one is completely RNG because you're going to have to pop your best defensive buffs at 70%. So you can't use them at the start of the fight. Again, if you have G-War, assuming you used her special in the last one, it's going to be refilled. You can use her special at the very start of the fight to survive the first AoE magic. Then you can activate the arc to get her special back. You just have to damage the boss with no buffs. Don't use any of your good stuff, just hit the boss, get it to 70% with nothing. Apply debuffs on it, obviously, but only spammable buffs. Get it to 70%, it's going to activate its rage buff and a curse buff. Basically, run in circles and hopefully the boss is in a melee attack cycle. And at that point, you can just run in circles and the boss won't attack you with magic until that buff wears out. That's how I was able to do it. If you're running from the boss and it's just spamming magic at you, you're going to die. You can't heal because of the debuffs that you have. You'll just die. GG. I was just restarting the final fight over and over and over. That's why I didn't bother recording, because every 10 minutes, not 10 minutes, every probably minute and a half, I would get hit with an AoE magic attack in that 70% phase and close the client, restart. There's no recovery from that. There is a chance. I tried a couple times. If you can get your whole team to die right after that debuff goes off and get them all to revive at the same time and manage to get heals on all of them so they don't die again and activate Rina's special again, you can recover the fight that way and skip waiting out the debuff. Now, I tried several times. Every single time, got hit with another AoE magic attack while I was reviving and getting everyone back up, and it just put me in a perpetual cycle of my DPS are dead, my DPS are alive, my DPS are dead. The boss is just completely wrecking your shit. So, you can try that. It might be the only way you can do it, depending on your teams. For me, it was much better to just try to get the boss into a melee attack lure and just run it in circles. Wait out its timer. Hopefully your other two characters are bulky enough to survive the very strong physical attacks from the spawns, or all the spawns are aggro to your main DPS. It's kind of like I had to put on the armor that you get from the story that gives you 15% reduced damage from non-gods just for this final phase, because otherwise I was getting completely wrecked. If your Shaltir dies after you use your buffs, the fight's over. Just restart, try again. So, you want to make sure she's bulky. As soon as those debuffs run out, and you fully stack all of your offensive buffs, all your debuffs, your arc buffs, like I was loading everything I had, you need to burst the boss down, because you're going to no longer be luring it, it's going to start doing magic again. You have about 10 seconds. 10 seconds that you need to get the boss down to 30%. Because at 30%, the boss activates Rage on itself, which makes its physical attacks hit cap damage, but it's a lot better to take 999 twice than take 999 50 times for magic on your whole team. So you get it to 30%, and if you get it there, you've probably won the fight. I got it down there, and then I died to a spell that it cast right before it activated Rage, and I was able to get my DPS back up just fine and finish it off, because, again, it doesn't use magic while it's enraged, and its magic is the entire danger of this fight. Like, the physical attacks, they hurt, but they don't kill your whole team over and over and over. They kill one person. The downside is they can kill Rina, which is a quick way to fully lose the fight rather than just restarting. restarting the round. It's not a good strategy. It definitely didn't feel good to do it. I sat here for like 2 hours trying to finally get a clear that just the RNG lined up and gave me a chance. And it's honestly so broken that it feels like it's intended just to catch hackers. Because the only people who can easily do this fight, maybe Wells, like, don't underestimate how powerful that 1% reduced damage for every character that you unlock their special skill can become. I have a lot of characters. I have 140 something, 150, I think. And they were just completely one-shotted me. So unless the other probably 50 characters that I'm missing were going to give me enough layered mitigation and bonuses that I was going to suddenly be much tankier than I am now, it's just extremely overtuned. To the point that I wouldn't be surprised if at some point in the next couple days, before the event's over, they just like gut this thing. Because if not, I feel like very few people are going to beat it unless there's some mechanic that I'm missing. It didn't seem that way. I tried several different teams. I took in anti-magic teams. It mattered a little bit. I mean, the anti-magic teams were able to easily survive the first boss for a little while, and then it starts ramping up its buff that increases its damage ridiculously, and then the anti-magic teams were dying, and they didn't have the DPS of a DPS team to kill the boss quickly. So they were being walled there. I tried like a pure paper DPS team, like maximum damage output, no level of support or sustain. They died to the AoE on the second boss. And my usual team, it's a very good team. Rena, Celestio, I rotated Celestio out for a couple different healer, support, SCT batteries. He's just the best. The final boss actually does have a good amount of bulk, so his 50% defense break was honestly necessary to finish, I think. But you could use other ones. You could use a 35% break from the arc. You could even maybe get away with a 20% break. You're just going to need more stats on your DPS. The only strategy I used for any of the bosses that actually matters, like quality of life to keep one of the heads alive before you spawn the main head on the second phase, you don't need to do that. Like, it's still going to come down to RNG of whether the AoE goes off over and over and over or just once. In this clear, it went off one time, and then the center head just kind of sat there and did nothing until it died. It's not very strong. It only has 100 billion HP, so that's still fairly strong, but like at this point with the DPSs that we have, with Shallowtear existing, even without her buff, 2 or 3 cycles of skills, that's dead. If it spams its AoE, then you just restart that round and continue to restart until it doesn't use its AoE. Very high level gameplay, I know, but like, I couldn't get a magic defensive team to that fight to see if I could actually survive the AoE regularly with more magic mitigation because I needed the DPS for the first fight. Like, the fact that this is 3 layers of fights that heavily stress all of your team's stats. You need bulk, you need DPS, you need just luck. I didn't really have a lot of options. Like, Labby is the only thing that I think might have been a factor. But even then, it's just not good.